Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the All Might Be Edified discussions on servant leadership. I'm Keith Pankow, and I have the wonderful privilege to be here with Ben Huntsman, who's joining us all the way from Fukuyama, Japan. Ben, who was born in Nevada but moved to Oregon at 14, went to Portland State University and had his first job at 10 years old and has been picking up odd jobs ever since. Now, I first met Ben when he was in the Air Force, and he spent 6 years on active duty before making the courageous jump to change complete career paths and go off to get an advanced degree in computer and electrical engineering. And after taking some internships at Intel and other companies, decided to move his family to Japan in 2016. Once getting to Japan, he taught school at different levels of the elementary, primary, secondary, and at the university level for a few years, and then moved to the logistics industry. He's now started his own company, FFI Systems, where he continues to do government contracts and other logistics work and contracting services. Well, welcome, Ben. So excited to have you on the podcast today.
Thanks for having me.
I should also mention, and this is one thing that we may ask some interesting questions about because we don't get it. It'll be some interesting logistics movements as well. Ben and his wonderful wife, Akari, have 11 children. And I imagine some guests will have some questions about the logistics of having 11 children in Japan. So I wanted to throw that out there, a wonderful, large family there in Japan. So I failed to mention that in the bio, but I couldn't fail to mention that because it's just a lovely family that you have there.
Yeah, thank you.
Ben, you speak English and Japanese, and you were an Arabic linguist in the Air Force. So you have a propensity for languages, and we know that you're good at those, and you decided to go off to be an engineer. And so what prompted that decision to go off and study such a different discipline in the first place?
It's kind of interesting. So I don't have like this idea of this is what I like or this is what I do, even this is who I am, right? So I'm always looking for change, which has led me down a lot of different roads, a lot of different opportunities. And, I was at a crossroads when I was in the Air Force. Do I extend my enlistment or do I get out and go back to school? And, it just felt like the right time to do that. And of course, I was in linguistics. So I had originally applied to my university and was accepted to their international studies program and was going to do international studies and continue in that field. But really, at the last minute, felt like I needed to go into engineering. And so I essentially, right before I left the Air Force, applied for the engineering program and changed everything and started something new.
That's an interesting thing for me just to make such a drastic change. Now, how was that being at engineering school? Was it hard or challenging? How'd you make that transition?
I was 31 when I went back to school, essentially because of engineering. I went back to school for a bachelor's degree to get a bachelor's degree in engineering before getting my master's, right? And that was interesting because the majority of my peers in that environment were 18, 19, 20-year-olds, who are single by themselves, enjoying, that kind of life. And when I went back to school, I had 6 kids. So surrounded by single people who are 10 years my junior. And it was definitely an interesting experience because, I had a family of 6 to support while going to school full time, spend time with my kids while trying to do well in school. And so that was definitely a difficult situation. But one thing I can say I was grateful for was the GI Bill. Wouldn't have been possible without that.
It definitely helps out a lot. I appreciate that as well. One of the characteristics of servant leadership articulated by Larry Spears is awareness. And he talks about general awareness and especially self-awareness strengthens the servant leader. Now, I think that's one of these traits that you have. You already talked about your awareness of not really trying to put yourself in a box of like what you are or what you do or what you like, and how you made this quick last minute change of linguistics from international relations to go into engineering. Now, as this older student in this college environment with many of these other people coming from a military mindset where you're put in these leadership opportunities, and as a person who I know cares a lot about people, did you find yourself in any opportunities to be a leader among your peers and influence them in study groups or any other ways?
It was, I guess, because of, I don't know, my experiences of not putting myself in I guess I could say in a box. I've always, I mean, from a young age, had friends from all different backgrounds, and that made it so that, even though I was in an environment where in many ways, I felt inadequate because I didn't feel as smart, I didn't feel as capable as, these 19, 20-year olds. But I still was able to find, common grounds, still was able to find opportunities to talk to them about different things. And because I had experienced, my experience in the Air Force, leadership roles there, and, meeting different kinds of people, I was able to, some of them give guidance, talk to them about other opportunities. And for the majority of them, they hadn't ever had any other jobs or anything like that. And, like you mentioned, I've done many different things, which allowed me with some of the people that I talked to discuss with them whether or not engineering was really the right choice for them. There were some people who struggled with the idea of doing that, whether or not it was really what they wanted to do. And so I watched a couple of people who left that program and decided to do other things.
Yeah, and that's so valuable at that point in their career to have that sounding board. And so I think what a remarkable influence of servant leadership and to build those relationships at such a pivotal point in someone's life. And it's interesting that you voice that semblance of imposter syndrome about not thinking you're smart enough. And, sometimes we need to surround ourselves, whether you were or weren't smart enough, we need to surround ourselves with people that are smarter than us and find our
Right.
strengths. And that's where that awareness or general awareness and self awareness comes into that equation of servant leadership, is recognizing what do we lend ourselves to that conversation, and how you surround yourself with these people in that environment, and how you brought those experiences and those different life experiences to the table and they had theirs. And I love the way that you phrased it, because you never once talked about their age as a weakness and your age as a weakness. You just looked at it as where they were at in their different life journey, and you bridged that. And so I think there's some value in the way that you just approached that was never voiced, but that we can all learn from in our different roles and the different organizations we have. Because I think too often we look at age and immediately we start to see barriers. We see a boss or a supervisor or maybe even a leader, if they're acting as such, that is younger than us. And we immediately take power from them or authority from them because of their age or different things like that. And so just a wonderful modeling that you did there, Ben, that I really appreciate. And is there any other thoughts you want to add to that under that kind of framing?
I don't know if this will kind of derail your thoughts or take us in a different direction, but being in Japan, all of the things that you just mentioned, like being able to, bridge the gap between different roles, different positions, different age groups, is extremely difficult in Japan, because Japan is a class society. And so much so that, from the time that kids are in elementary school, first, second, and third grade are considered essentially the lower level of elementary school. Fourth, fifth, and sixth grade are higher level of elementary school. And then there's also just each grade. A sixth grader has more authority than a fifth grader, and just due to age, nothing but age. So that is a difficult environment to work in when you want to try to bridge those gaps.
Yeah, it's interesting too. And I think not just in Japan, I think even without the class society, we see those things happen even in the United States sometimes as well. We do that even unintentionally sometimes. So that can happen, right? And you mentioned something to me as we were catching up because Ben and I have been friends for a long time, and I've known his wife Akari for a long time, and I one of the things that I found interesting just talking about different cultures is the Japanese don't like root beer, and we in the United States tend to like root beer a lot, and so just sharing different things about cultures, right? And so we once played a mean joke on one of our friends and tried to convince him that Akari liked root beer, and she scowled at him for why would he offer her a root beer? And we laughed really hard at that. And so it was pretty funny. But going back, Ben was sharing with me that when Akari was in the United States, she had to rely on him for the taxes, the legalities, and all that stuff. And I just found that so interesting. And then when you made the decision to move to Japan, how did that relationship change? And how do you think that changed you as a servant leader and just as a person and in society, in the home? And just kind of how did that make you more compassionate as a leader as well?
That's a difficult one. I had, I guess you could say, become comfortable with having my wife, my spouse, be reliant on me for so many things, and then having those roles essentially reversed, right? Me then relying on her for things that were really important for our family and really important for our living. Really, changed my perspective. I saw her grow. Moving back to Japan, I think was one of the best things for her to see her, I guess you could say, need to take on that role and to see me rely on her for so much really, in many ways, strengthened our relationship. And very difficult for me, you know, but at the same time, I really got to see an amazing change in her.
Yeah, I just think that's such a powerful framing for so many of us to think about because, we can get very comfortable in our situational roles of, paying the bills, taking care of taxes, whatever it may be. But these little things, transitioning these thoughts even into our workplaces or schooling or even how we deal with our kids or just whoever we deal with, this that way you phrase that, seeing her grow, that change, allowing her we can manufacture these changes. We don't have to make a big life event if we're thoughtful and intentional about them. And I think that this example of you moving to Japan and how we think about what that did for Akari, that really can help us think about, all right, she needed to take on this responsibility because you didn't know anything about Japanese laws, Japanese taxes, how to do these things. So she had to step up into this role that she wasn't necessarily natural for where your relationship had come, but she could do it because she's a talented woman and she just wasn't doing it at that time. So that's fine. But so she stepped up and did it. And, you know, but we can get comfortable, minimizing people's abilities. And so sometimes we need to look for ways to manufacture ways to let people grow and shine and not take on too much ourselves. And, what do you think about how we can manufacture more opportunities for people in all different settings like that?
Yeah, it's so true. I definitely wish that we would have done it sooner. We were married for 13 years before making that change. It would have been nice to have, for one, have that additional help for me as with her, helping her grow to be able to help with those things earlier on would have been a great help for me so that we can share those responsibilities. So, really in a work environment or in a family environment, looking for those opportunities to help someone grow. And sometimes it can be really difficult for them though. As an example, I guess, of that would be, my oldest son right now, who's going to be turning 20 this year. He has ADHD and he has a difficulty with changing things. And when he has his mind set on something, something changes, then it just really, really frustrates him. And so right now, he had gone out of the house for about 6 months, trying to, experience life on his own. he came back and said, I want to study. I want to learn something new and grow. So I tried that before, tried helping him with that. But at this point, it took him to make the decision of, I want to do something now. And now I'm faced every day with, how do I help him on that path? Right. And so right now he's helping me, with my company. He's building a web app or a mobile application that, it's a very big struggle for him because you have to focus. He's learning something completely new. It's really difficult for him to focus more than like 15 minutes. When I try to help him, help him work through his frustrations, he gets really worked up, really frustrated, and really, really defensive about everything. So doing this, looking for opportunities and helping people grow isn't easy, but trying to help them grow from where they're at is, man, I can't say anything more than just saying that sometimes I feel like I want to give up.
Yeah, it's tough. And Robert Greenleaf said about what Larry Spears was saying about, he said it before Larry Spears said it, because Larry Spears quoted Robert Greenleaf as saying, awareness is not a giver of solace. It's just the opposite. It is a disturber and an awakener. Able leaders are usually sharply awake and reasonably disturbed. They are not seekers after solace. They have their own inner serenity. Meaning, like, you have to disturb that peace to get people to want to break out of their comfort zone. And it's a difficult process because you're constantly balancing between, how do I get people out of their comfort zone and push them into the growth zone, but not so far that they're into the panic zone. And so that's a difficult challenge, because with Benjamin there, it's a fine, get him too far. He's in that panic zone where he doesn't want to work on the app. And so you have to constantly pull him back into the growth zone without pulling him too far into the comfort zone, right? Where he's not doing anything again. And so it's a give and take situation. And that I think many of us can realize that happens with a lot of the people we work with in all given situations, whether it's volunteer work, organizational work, family work. These are very applicable situations that just cross so many boundaries. And so I think that is a great relevant story that you shared.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. Now, so you get to Japan and you studied as an engineer. You're from the United States. So you get over there. I have to imagine it must not have been easy making all these changes all at once. We've talked about one of these challenges. You get over there, you're learning a whole new culture. You'd lived in Japan before, so it wasn't completely new to you. This was a lot different because now you're going over there to work and provide for a big family, and you're in a completely new career field for the first time as a professional. So what did you do? How'd that work out for you?
We moved to Japan, or actually, let me back up. After we got married, we said that we would not want to raise our kids in Japan because we knew of the culture, we knew the environment, we knew that it was going to be really difficult for them to it would be really difficult to raise a family in Japan. All that would be required of us, all that would be required of them, in the environment that they would be in would be difficult. But as I was finishing up school and looking to see where we were going to go, I was offered after my internship, I was offered a full-time position at Intel, and so I had no reason to leave. Essentially, I was offered my dream job at Intel, and no reason to leave whatsoever. But we felt like there's no other time that we can do it, and we really felt like we need to, and that was a very difficult decision for us to make, especially after having 10 plus years of feeling like no way, no way, no way. So essentially we came to Japan with no plan. no idea of what we were going to do. No, I had no idea if I was going to find a job. And, knowing the environment, I was definitely not sure if I wanted to work at some Japanese company because of the difficulties with that. So, we went from a very, very comfortable situation to a situation where our whole family was being tried. The kids were having difficult time at school, being, I guess you could say, bullied, being treated as different because, they're half American. And I just started doing whatever work I could do because I couldn't find any engineering work. And so I taught English. I taught, because of my engineering experience, I taught programming and I taught how to use computers. And, essentially I had a company doing that and did very well doing that. But yeah, I mean, again, it was one of those ideas of, leaving, not knowing what was going to happen and experiencing all new things.
What did you learn from that teaching experience, and how did it help you become a better leader?
You mean teaching experiences and growing from, this difficult experience is what you're talking about?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I think both the metaphorical teaching experience and the physical teaching experience, because you were actively teaching too. Yeah.
So let me take the metaphorical one first. I think that one is a little bit easier, I guess, to explain. As I already explained, of course, my, seeing the changes in my wife, and in my kids, but learning again that change is a good thing. There's the saying that the only thing that doesn't change is change. The only thing that's constant is change. And I have had so many experiences in my life where, I learned that over and over again. And, I feel that God has continually tried to teach me that don't get complacent. Don't just be comfortable. Always look for opportunities to change. And because of that, it changes how we view people. It changes the kinds of people that we can communicate with. If we're ready for whatever change, then we realize that we're all at different levels. That means that I can talk to someone who's younger than me, older than me. I feel comfortable with them in any situation. And you learn through those life experiences to have empathy with people in their life experiences, and whether or not they want to accept that you understand them or not, because that's a very common response of, you don't understand my issue. But really, through these experiences, that's, I think, what we learn. We're ready to accept change.
Yeah, that's a beautiful
thought. Yeah. Now, in terms of the physical, real life teaching experiences, teaching from, all the way from elementary, I shouldn't say that. I should say kindergarten. My youngest students teaching English was 3 years old, right? All the way through university, teaching technical English. So teaching how to write technical reports, also medical English to medical students, things like that. Seeing the variety of attitudes towards education, the really the differences in the kinds of students, even the kinds of students depending on what department they are in. Students that are studying physical education or finance compared to engineering or medical students. Their commitment to learning, their commitment to, their assignments, their willingness to talk to their teacher. That was a huge learning experience, just that alone. Also, I really liked the idea of, gathering as much information as possible, especially about my students, to know kind of what they would be interested in. So I always did a survey at the beginning of my classes of each semester. And I was amazed, absolutely amazed at the university level, that 80% of my students. And during the time that I was a university professor, I taught, I don't know, a couple thousand students, right? And 80% of them said that their hobby was playing video games, and that they spent 8 to 10 hours a day playing video games. 80% of my students said that. That wasn't even me saying, is your hobby video games? It was, what hobby do you have? And then they write it in, and then saying, how much time do you spend on this? And they tell me 8 or 10 hours a day. So that was an eye opener, and really helped me change my way of teaching.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Two themes I think I really want to touch on from everything that you said. The first one, I go back about complacency. When I was in Iraq, on all the big barriers, we call them Jersey barriers, the big concrete barriers that they had. They had these stamped letters that said "complacency kills." Just like when you get complacency, you're more apt to miss an IED. You're more apt to miss something that's probably you're going to die. And so, but I think about that phrase all the time. I can actually see that image in my mind, because that phrase "complacency kills" actually has so much double meaning in so many contexts. And, it kills so many things. It kills collaboration. It kills productivity. It kills the way we interact with people. When we get complacent about people, it kills our ability to relate to them. It kills our ability to connect on a deeper level. Complacency, it just kills everything. And so I love the fact that you brought that up, and that transitions to my second theme that you brought up, is like you connected at such a deeper level with the way you transitioned about learning, about how different students approach learning different ways, about how your students' hobby was video games and how that had to change your way you taught, and just different things, and how you needed to learn more about your students. So you did surveys. And I just think about, like, going back to complacency, like, we need to spend time getting to know people. And going back to Marcus Kennedy's episode, the last episode, the more time we spend getting to know people at a deeper level, really having real conversations about people, about the things that matter to them, we can have a deeper impact in their lives, and getting beyond that complacency, because that's the thing that kills relationship and depth of meaning between us. And just some powerful thoughts. And so I want to leave that opportunity with now to make the invitation for this episode, and spend time evaluating yourself with that awareness topic, some self-awareness, some general awareness, and think about where you're complacent in your life right now. Where are you not spending time getting to know the people around you, or taking that depth of evaluation, and make some actions to remedy your complacency in your life right now. Take some intentional actions to remedy the complacency in the aspects where you're most complacent, and then take steps to move beyond that and fix the other areas of complacency, and then build a plan to make habits to continually remedy complacency on a regular basis in your life, because that's what's going to keep you alive in your relationships with others and in your servant leadership. Anything you'd like to add to that, Ben?
Oh, that's absolutely true. Exactly as you said, complacency really leads us to lose control, lose our relationships, lose our, in some cases, lose our minds. So, I think that's exactly what, even right now, as you were saying that, I'm like, yeah, I think I need to do that right now.
Well, I love it. I love it when I can give a thought that people want to take action on. So that's a good thing. And you inspired it. So take some credit where credit is due. Now, I think, so you transition from teaching, you go on to this company. So what led to that transition from teaching? Because you obviously were kind of making some success there. So why did you decide to move on from teaching?
That's an interesting story. I really wasn't planning on it. I mean, I was pretty happy where I was. We were doing well. Our company, I was putting in a lot of hours, but at the same time, we had made a lot of relationships, made a lot of good relationships with with a lot of people through that, met a lot of amazing people. And there was, of course, continuing new opportunities with that. And then just one day out of the blue, the, I guess, leadership of a group of companies contacted me and asked if I'd be willing to meet them to talk about a business opportunity with them. And so I said, okay, that sounds interesting. And so I met with them, and they asked me to help them work or help them get contracts with the US government, and primarily logistics. But that group of companies were logistics, agriculture, vehicle maintenance, and they did all kinds of different things. But yeah, they asked me to help them with US government contracting, and they wanted to get into that market here in Japan. There being, quite a few bases for the military here. The closest one being MCAS Iwakuni, the Marine base that's about 2 hours from here. And I was like, well, that seems kind of interesting. And so at first I was just consulting for them and just kind of seeing where that was going to go. And then offered me a full-time position to leave what I was doing to come and work for them. So that was a difficult decision because I was really interested and I was doing very interesting things. Again, I was able to also go back into engineering because they didn't have that in their group. They had no one doing IT, no one doing anything for their systems. So it was like I could come in and do two things that were really interesting to me, back in engineering and also back in working with the government, with the U.S. government. And so after some, real pondering and praying about it, we decided to do it. That's right when Corona hit. So, if I hadn't taken that opportunity, if I hadn't done that, all of my other jobs would have disappeared. All of the English jobs and a lot of the instruction that was not considered absolutely necessary were removed from all schools, and which meant that I would have lost everything. Even my private business would have all gone because I wouldn't have been able to do private lessons or hold classes anymore, which meant that everything would have been gone. So that change to do that was definitely a godsend, a blessing.
Yeah, that's just some perfect timing. Such a blessing, and good opportunity to get you some good experience with engineering and IT to go ahead and start your own business. So you go ahead and got some good experience. You got moving, and so now you're off on your own business. Tell us a little bit about your business and what your kind of focus is on your business and what motivates you to support your customers.
Actually, when I decided to start my company, before I decided what I was going to do, I decided, I guess you could say, why I was going to do it. I wanted to work for a company. I wanted to be a part of a company that put their employees first. And that, in my mind, means that my employees will put my clients first. And I wanted an environment in which my employees felt encouraged, uplifted, supported, and in turn, my clients would feel encouraged, uplifted, and supported. So, of course, depending on what kind of business it is, that changes what that means. How all of those things happen. So the next thing had to be, what do I do? Right. And so I decided that, well, I have a big family, right? So I have to make sure that whatever I do is going to support them. So then thinking about all my experiences, that I could take advantage of the relationships that I made in my last role, my last company, and support contractors that work for the US government as a consultant. But I guess going back to what I just said about the why, not a consultant, but as a partner, working alongside them, with them, caring as much about their company as I do mine, and really caring about that relationship with them and the relationship that they have with the U.S. government, and helping support that relationship. So the what became whatever it is they need to help support them in performing their duties as U.S. government contractors. Of course, I do work for companies that aren't U.S. government contractors as well. But in terms of that relationship, supporting, partnering with them as much as possible, really, I don't feel like I am just some other service provider. That's not what I want it to be. I want it to be really someone that they could rely on, they could treat as, as someone of their own, which is isn't always easy. It can be a difficult situation.
Totally tough situation, but I love that focus to treat their company the same as your own. Such a beautiful way to build a partnership. And, I think that's the way that we could build better relationships in all that we do in our organizations, the way we interact with our customers. Just such a way to build these teams around us, and such a great philosophy, such a beautiful way to build servant leadership in every facet of our lives. So just wonderful. Now, the final question I have for you as we wrap up, just because I wonder about it, I won't project that our other guests wonder about it. This is a purely selfish question. So if you guests wonder about it, you can join with me. What's the hardest thing about having 11 kids in Japan?
Actually, having to answer the question of how many kids do you have? And then the aftermath of that.
What's the typical aftermath?
Let's see. First, it's like, what did you just say? And then after saying it again, and it's like, really? And then it's like, oh my. I mean, it's really like this multiple levels of reaction, that really just starts out with, like, it's almost like they didn't hear. They're like, no way, did you really just say that? I'm just kind of joking about that, but the most difficult thing would be school, hearing the things that they have to deal with at school. Lots of, at least in the past, I don't hear it so much recently, but, for our older kids who came here when they were in elementary school, hearing about the battles that they had with, bullying and what's the word? Not racism. Discrimination. Thank you, Daniel. Having that, bullying, discrimination, things like that related to, either being American or being white or, just being different. It's not necessarily about the number of kids. It's really about the environment that we have to raise them in.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, I've wondered that for a long time. Just for you listening, I've known the Huntsman family for quite some time. They had a issue with one of their first homes that they bought, and they actually lived with the Pankow family for a little while. So Ben, Akari, Benjamin, Daniel, Samuel, and I believe, was it Samuel
just
or was
Samuel?
Just a Samuel, right? Yeah, the three boys at that time. They stayed with us for 6 weeks, I believe. They lived in our home, and it was a wonderful situation. And Kari's mom actually came and visited from Japan and stayed with us for a little while. And she was a marvelous woman, and she makes really good curry. I'll just tell you that. So it was phenomenal. We haven't caught up in some time, so it was nice to chat with him today. But I've been wanting to ask that question for a while, so I took a selfish liberty here on the podcast. And I always think about the trains. That's what I think about the most, is getting all those kids on the trains. But obviously my answer was not the right one. So,
that definitely can be a chore. Yeah.
So, well, I appreciate you being on today. It's been a wonderful, fruitful discussion. Any final thoughts to wrap us up today, Ben?
I would like to say thank you, Keith, for having me, and thank you for your friendship for a long time. And as you just said, thank you for letting us come and stay in your house for a while. It was a great experience. A lot of long nights, talking late in the night together. Yeah, I mean, thank you for your podcast. Thank you for all those who have joined the podcast and are supporting the podcast. I know I'm not perfect, but like Keith, I believe in change. I believe in trying to be a better servant leader. So yeah, let's keep it going.
Yeah, thanks for those comments, Ben. Thanks all of you for joining us. Please like, subscribe, review, and share the podcast with those others so that we can all be edified. And like Ben's trying to do there in Japan, make the world a better place, person by person, relationship by relationship. And have a wonderful day.